Jarek and Lyra had thought they were prepared. Years of training, survival drills, and shared battles had sharpened their skills and forged their bond into something nearly unbreakable. But nothing could have prepared them for the ambush. The vast expanse of space around them was suddenly alive with hostile vessels, alien ships cutting through the void like deadly predators. Jarek's ship shuddered as plasma bolts tore through the hull. The slavers had found them, and there was no time to run. "Lyra, hold on," Jarek shouted, gripping the controls as the ship spun wildly. Alarms blared, red lights flashing over the cockpit. The roar of the engines was drowned out by the cacophony of warning signals. They had been cornered, trapped between the hunters. But they didn't go quietly. Lyra, a fierce fighter in her own right, grabbed her pulse rifle, her eyes burning with determination. "We fight," she said simply. Jarek nodded, though his heart clenched. Their chance of escape was slim, but he would rather die fighting than be taken without a struggle. Together, they prepared for boarding, knowing that if separated, they would be easy prey. The slavers' boarding party hit fast and brutal. Their armor was strange, their weapons harsh and unforgiving. Jarek felt the sting of plasma fire, dodged blows that could crush bones, and fought with every ounce of strength. But the numbers overwhelmed them. Lyra was torn away from him during the chaos, dragged into a dark corridor by a pair of slavers. "Jarek?" She called out, her voice filled with fierce hope. He tried to reach her, to break free, but hands grabbed him, restraining him as the world spun violently around him. Captured. Jarek was thrown into a dimly lit cell, the harsh metal bars cold against his skin. The stench of sweat, fear, and something darker filled the air. The arena, the gladiatorial pit, awaited him. It was a place where warriors were broken, their spirits crushed under the weight of endless battles for alien amusement. But Jarek's spirit burned brighter than ever. His mind raced, replaying Lyra's voice, her strength, her promise. They had survived worse before, and he would not let this be the end. Days passed in the cage, his muscles aching from confinement, but his resolve sharpening like a blade. The sounds of the arena seeped through the walls. The cheers, the jeers, the brutal clashes of weapons. The crowd came to watch, to see if the human would last more than a few fights. They didn't know what humans were capable of. When the gates finally opened and Jarek was thrust into the glaring light of the arena, he felt the weight of 1,000 eyes on him. The alien opponents towering before him sneered, certain he was weak, a mere novelty for their entertainment. But as the combat began, Jarek moved with the speed and precision of a predator. His every strike was calculated, every dodge instinctive. The crowd's roar shifted from mocking laughter to stunned silence and then to cheers. One fight was not enough to win his freedom, but it was enough to send a message. This human was not broken. Not yet. Jarek's mind remained clear. One goal burning brighter than the flames of the arena itself: find Lyra. Survive. Fight. And no matter what, never lose hope. The arena was unlike anything Jarek had ever faced. Towering walls encased the battleground, and above, alien spectators filled every tier, their voices a deafening roar. The air was thick with the scent of sweat, blood, and anticipation. This was not just a fight for survival. It was a spectacle, a twisted dance where every move was watched, judged, and exploited for entertainment. Jarek's first opponent was a towering brute from the Thraxian species. Covered in thick, spiked armor and wielding a massive warhammer, the alien was confident, sneering at the human challenger as if dismissing him before the fight had even begun. The crowd laughed, some jeering, others simply eager to see how long the fragile human would last. But Jarek did not hesitate. He studied his opponent, noting the heavy armor slowed the Thraxian's movements. Using his smaller size to his advantage, Jarek darted in and out of reach, striking with sharp precision. His fists and feet found gaps in the armor, targeting joints and exposed skin. Each blow was a calculated gamble, but the human's unpredictability kept the brute off balance. The arena echoed with the clang of weapon on armor and the grunts of effort. When the Thraxian finally staggered and fell, the crowd erupted. Some cheered in surprise, others hissed their displeasure. But Jarek's victory had been more than physical. It was a statement. Humans were not to be underestimated. Days turned into weeks, and Jarek was forced into fight after fight. Each match was a test of endurance and cunning. The slavers took sadistic pleasure in pitting him against creatures far stronger, faster, or more numerous. Some were reptilian hunters with razor-sharp claws. Others were insectoid warriors who attacked in deadly swarms. Through it all, Jarek's resolve never wavered. He learned to read the arena, using its terrain to his advantage: narrow corridors, uneven ground, and even the deadly traps the slavers had set. The human mind, adaptable and creative, became his greatest weapon. Other prisoners began to watch him with growing respect and curiosity. Some whispered about the human who fought like a force of nature, defying odds that should have ended him long ago. Jarek noticed their glances, felt their hope stir. In a place designed to crush spirits, his fighting sparked something more, an ember of rebellion. But not all eyes were friendly. The arena's overseers, cruel and cunning, saw Jarek as a threat to their control. They tightened their hold, sending assassins and champions to end him quickly. The fights became deadlier, the rules more twisted. It was no longer just about entertainment. It was about power, control, and breaking the human's will. Jarek felt the pressure, but it only fueled his determination. Each battle was not just for survival, but a step closer to finding Lara. He imagined her strength, her courage, and it gave him the energy to push beyond pain and exhaustion. At night, in the cold and darkness of his cell, Jarek trained relentlessly. His muscles ached, but his mind sharpened. He replayed every fight, every tactic, every mistake. He knew that to survive, and to win, he had to become more than a fighter. He had to become a symbol of hope. The arena was cruel, but Jarek was crueler still. Cruel in his refusal to surrender. Cruel in the way he used every disadvantage as a weapon. The aliens might have seen him as entertainment, but he saw himself as a warrior. And warriors fought for something greater than themselves. They fought for love. The arena was more than just a battleground. It was a prison filled with broken souls from across the galaxy. Warriors of all shapes, sizes, and backgrounds were forced to fight day after day, their hopes slowly fading beneath the weight of endless violence. Yet, even in this place of despair, connections could be forged, alliances born from necessity and trust. Jarek understood this better than most. His strength was undeniable, but even he could not face the slavers alone. When he was thrown into the holding area with other prisoners, he kept his guard up, eyes sharp and ready. But he also observed carefully, looking for others who might share his desire to survive, and maybe, just maybe, escape. One figure caught his attention: Kale, a towering alien with scarred skin and a wary gaze. Kale had once been a champion gladiator, known for his brutal efficiency and tactical mind. Yet behind his intimidating exterior, Jarek sensed a hunger for freedom that matched his own. "Human," Kale said one evening, his voice low but steady. "You fight well, but it's not enough to survive here. You'll need allies." Jarek nodded. "I want to find someone. My mate was taken from me. I can't do it alone." Kale's eyes flickered with understanding. "Then you have a reason to fight beyond these walls. We can help each other." The two began to exchange stories, sharing knowledge about the arena and the slavers' operations. Jarek learned that the gladiators were part of a larger network. Slavery rings stretched across multiple systems, with dozens of arenas feeding a cruel trade of captives. Lyra's location was uncertain, but rumors placed her somewhere in the outer sectors, deep within enemy territory. With Cal's help, Jarek met others: Naira, a swift and cunning scout from a desert planet; Vesk, a heavy hitter with a heart as large as his frame; and Sira, a healer who tended to the wounded and whispered words of hope in the darkness. Each had their own reasons to resist, their own losses to avenge. Together, they formed a fragile alliance, bound by mutual trust and the shared goal of freedom. They practiced in secret, exchanging combat techniques and strategies. Jarek taught them human fighting styles, unorthodox, unpredictable, and brutally effective. In turn, they shared knowledge of alien technology and weaknesses of the guards. But the slavers were always watching. suspicion ran high, and every meeting was a risk. When a guard grew too curious, Jarek used his quick thinking to deflect attention, spinning stories and playing the role of the simple human. Still, the threat of discovery loomed, tightening like a noose around their plans. Despite the danger, hope flourished in their small group. Jarek's determination inspired others, and whispers of rebellion began to spread among the captives. They spoke of escape, of striking back, of tearing down the cruel system piece by piece. For Jarek, the alliance was more than survival. It was the first step toward reclaiming his life and reuniting with Lara. Every new friend was a beacon of light in the darkness, a reminder that even in chains, the human spirit could not be broken. As the days passed, their plans grew bolder. They studied guard patrols, mapped the arena's hidden passages, and gathered what little resources they could. The time for waiting was ending. The time to fight back was coming. Jarek's alliance had grown from whispered conversations into a determined force. Every secret meeting, every shared plan, fed their hope. But the longer they waited, the more the slavers tightened their control. The overseers began punishing any sign of dissent with brutal displays meant to crush spirits. The arena had become a cage not just of metal, but of fear. One day, the overseers announced a special event, a deadly match featuring Jarek and the reigning champion, a monstrous creature known as Gorath. The crowd's anticipation was electric. Gorath was feared throughout the sector, strong, ruthless, and seemingly invincible. This match was meant to break the human once and for all. As Jarek prepared, his allies saw more than a fight. They saw a chance. "This is it," Kale whispered in the shadows. "If he can survive this, we might finally have the spark we need." Jarek didn't have time to respond. The gates opened, and the arena flooded with light. Gorath's roar shook the air as he charged forward, claws extended and eyes blazing with fury. The fight was brutal. Jarek dodged crushing blows and countered with swift strikes aimed at weakening the beast's defenses. The crowd's roar shifted. Some cheered for Gorath's dominance. Others watched in disbelief as the human held his ground. Every move Jarek made was a calculated risk, buying time for what was to come. Suddenly, at the edge of the arena, a small group of captives, Jarek's allies, rose as one, breaking from their chains and rushing the guards. Their rebellion caught the slavers by surprise. The crowd erupted in chaos as prisoners fought for their lives and freedom. Jarek seized the moment. Using Gorath's momentary distraction, he landed a decisive blow, sending the champion crashing to the ground. The victory was more than personal. It was the signal for the uprising. The arena transformed into a battlefield. Slavers struggled to regain control as prisoners overwhelmed them with fierce determination. The alliance fought with everything they had, fueled by years of suffering and the hope of freedom. Jarek moved through the chaos like a force of nature, protecting his allies and striking down enemies. He sought the overseers, knowing that cutting off the head of the operation was key to success. The captives rallied around him, their confidence swelling with every victory. But the slavers were ruthless. Reinforcements arrived quickly, turning the tide. The rebellion was fierce, but not yet unstoppable. The prisoners were forced to retreat, scattering into the maze of corridors beneath the arena. As they fled, Jarek's heart burned with the knowledge that this was only the beginning. The spark of rebellion had been lit, but the fire needed to grow. They needed more allies, more resources, and a plan to break free, not just from the arena, but from the entire slave network. Back in the shadows, Jarek and his group regrouped. They tended to wounds, shared information, and planned their next moves. Every scar was a reminder of their fight, every breath a testament to their will. Jarek looked at the faces around him, scarred, tired, but unbroken. Among them was the hope he carried for Lara's rescue. The spark had been lit, and now the rebellion would burn. Freedom was no longer a distant dream. It was a fight waiting to be won. The arena, once a place of cruel spectacle, had become a battleground of desperation and hope. The rebellion's spark had ignited a fire that spread quickly through the ranks of captives. Chaos reigned as the prisoners fought back against their captors with raw courage and fierce determination. Jarek moved through the turmoil like a whirlwind, every step purposeful, every strike precise. He was no longer just a fighter in the arena. He had become a leader. His voice cut through the noise as he shouted orders, coordinating attacks and shielding weaker prisoners. The alliance forged in secrecy now showed its strength in the open. The slavers, though caught off guard at first, rallied quickly. Their soldiers were trained killers, equipped with advanced weapons and brutal tactics. The clash was savage. Plasma bolts lit the air, metal clanged against metal, and cries of pain and defiance echoed across the shattered arena. But the prisoners fought with something the slavers could not understand: unyielding hope. Each captive fought not only for their own survival, but for the freedom of all. Jarek's determination was infectious, inspiring others to push beyond their limits. Despite the overwhelming odds, the rebels managed to hold their ground. They used their intimate knowledge of the arena's layout to their advantage, ambushing guards in narrow corridors and disabling key security systems. Jarek led a group to seize the armory, turning stolen weapons against the slavers. In the midst of the chaos, Jarek's mind never left Lyra. His heart ached with the image of her, alone and captive, somewhere far from his reach. Every blow he struck was a promise. He would find her. He refused to let anger cloud his judgment, relying instead on cold focus and tactical precision. The battle reached its peak when the prisoners faced the arena's command center. Taking control of the facility meant disrupting the slavers' ability to call for reinforcements and control security drones. Jarek and Kale fought side by side, breaking through waves of guards with relentless force. But the cost was high. Many captives fell, their sacrifices fueling the resolve of the survivors. The arena was no longer just a prison. It was a crucible where courage was tested and forged. As the rebels secured the command center, an alarm blared throughout the complex. The slavers' flagship was preparing to launch a counterattack. Time was running out. Jarek gathered his allies, their faces streaked with sweat and blood but shining with fierce determination. "This fight isn't over," he said. "We've made them fear us, but now we must use that fear. We're not just escaping. We're taking the fight to them." With the command center under their control, the prisoners disabled security locks and opened gates throughout the arena. The chaos allowed many captives to flee into the labyrinth beneath the Colosseum, disappearing into the shadows in safety. Jarek stayed behind long enough to ensure the success of the plan, then vanished into the maze, ready to continue the fight. The rebellion was no longer a secret. It was a movement. And at its heart was a human warrior who refused to be broken. The rebellion had shaken the slavers' grip, but freedom was still a distant dream. Jarek and the survivors slipped away from the shattered arena, fleeing into the dark tunnels beneath the fortress. They knew the slavers wouldn't let them go easily. Their fleet was vast, their hunters relentless. The group moved quickly, guided by Cal's knowledge of the enemy's patrol routes and hidden supply caches. Their goal was clear: track down Lyra and any other prisoners held captive within the slaver network. But the stars offered no sanctuary. Every system they passed through was crawling with bounty hunters and slave traders, hunting for any trace of escapees. Jarek kept his eyes on the skies, scanning for signs of pursuit. Their stolen ship was fast, but not fast enough to outrun the fleet forever. He relied on human ingenuity, crafting clever diversions and using every trick to stay off the enemy's radar. Each jump through hyperspace brought them closer to the outer sectors, dangerous territories where lawlessness thrived, but also where the slavers operated with brutal efficiency. The survivors relied on stealth and subterfuge, knowing that one wrong move could mean capture or death. As they infiltrated enemy supply stations and abandoned outposts, Jarek's group gathered intelligence. They hacked data cores and interrogated low-level guards, piecing together fragments of information about Lyra's location. She was held deep within a heavily fortified moon base, guarded by elite troops and cutting-edge technology. The revelation steeled Jarek's resolve. The fortress was daunting, but he refused to be deterred. He trained the rebels relentlessly, honing their skills and coordinating guerrilla tactics designed for the looming assault. Every practice session was a reminder that failure was not an option. But the slavers were not idle. They unleashed their own hunters, deadly assassins skilled in tracking and eliminating fugitives. Several close calls left the group on edge, forcing them to move constantly and adapt quickly. The hunt was as much a psychological battle as a physical one. In one tense encounter, Jarek faced a shadowy assassin sent specifically to kill him. The fight was brutal and personal, testing Jarek's reflexes and willpower to the limit. When he emerged victorious, his confidence grew. He wasn't just fighting for himself anymore. He was fighting for everyone who had suffered under the slavers' rule. The small band of rebels became a symbol of defiance, slipping through enemy lines and striking where the slavers least expected. Their message was clear: humanity would not be broken, and neither would those who dared to stand with them. Despite the constant danger, Jarek's thoughts never strayed far from Lyra. He clung to the hope that they would be reunited, that their bond would survive even the darkest trials. The stars might be vast and unforgiving, but he was human, and humans had a way of fighting back. The next battle would be the hardest yet. The moon fortress awaited, cold and merciless. But Jarek was ready. For love, for freedom, for the fight of a lifetime. The moon base loomed like a dark monolith against the cold stars. Its walls were thick with reinforced alloys, bristling with turrets, and guarded by elite troops whose reputation for brutality was known across the sectors. For Jarek and his small band of rebels, this was the ultimate challenge, the fortress where Lyra was held captive. Careful planning had been their only hope. Using stolen schematics and insider knowledge from captured guards, Jarek mapped out a route through the labyrinthine corridors and security zones. Stealth was crucial. The slavers' sensors were advanced, and one misstep would trigger alarms that meant certain death. As they approached the base, tension was palpable. Every member of the group felt the weight of what was at stake. Jarek's eyes never left the horizon. His mind focused on the one reason they risked everything: Lyra. "Remember," he whispered, "we don't just fight for ourselves. We fight for everyone who's ever been trapped, every voice silenced by these monsters. We bring hope." The rebels slipped inside through a forgotten airlock, their movements silent and precise. Within the cold steel walls, danger lurked at every turn. Guards patrolled in ships, automated turrets scanned corridors, and surveillance drones hovered like mechanical vultures. Jarek led them through shadows and vents, disabling security systems where possible. The group moved as one, a blend of human grit and alien skill forged in the fires of rebellion. Suddenly, alarms blared. They had been detected. The slavers were faster than expected, flooding the corridors with reinforcements. A fierce firefight erupted. Plasma bolts tore through the air as Jarek's rebels fought desperately to push forward. Kale and Nira flanked enemies with brutal efficiency, while Sira tended to the wounded under fire. Despite the chaos, Jarek pressed on. His heart pounded not with fear, but with fierce determination. Every step brought him closer to Lyra. They reached the holding cells deep within the base, a cold, sterile block where captives were kept in chains. Jarek's breath caught when he spotted her. Lyra looked tired but unbroken. Her eyes met his, and in that moment, all the pain and struggle made sense. He moved to free her, the sound of clinking chains like a promise of freedom. But the slavers weren't finished. The base commander appeared, flanked by guards. His cruel smile was a challenge. "You're too late, human. This is where your fight ends." Jarek raised his weapon, voice steady. "This isn't the end. It's only the beginning." The battle that followed was fierce and desperate. Jarek and Lyra fought side by side, their bond stronger than ever. Together with their allies, they overcame the guards and disabled the fortress's defenses. As alarms faded and the slavers' forces retreated, the rebels took control. The base was theirs. The victory was hard won, but it marked the turning point. Lyra was free. Jarek's fight had not only saved her, it had struck a devastating blow against the slaver network. The stars, once hostile and cold, now held the promise of freedom and hope. The fortress was silent now, its halls no longer echoing with the footsteps of captors or the cries of prisoners. Jarek stood beside Lyra, watching as the first rays of the distant sun cut through the moon's dark surface. Freedom was no longer just a dream, it was real. Their journey had been long and brutal, marked by battles, loss, and sacrifice. Yet, as they looked out over the stars, a quiet hope settled in their hearts. The slaver network had been struck a devastating blow, but the fight to end their cruelty was far from over. Lyra turned to Jarek, her eyes shining with a fierce light. "We did it," she said softly. "Together." Jarek nodded, feeling the weight of the past months lift, even if just for a moment. This is only the beginning. There are others out there, others still trapped. We have to keep fighting. The rebels gathered around them, battered but unbroken. Kel clapped Jarek on the shoulder, a rare smile breaking across his face. "You showed us what it means to be human, strong, stubborn, and unwilling to give up." Sira began organizing medical supplies, tending to those still injured. Naira and Vesk worked on repairing the stolen ships, preparing for the long journey ahead. Each member of the group carried the scars of battle, but also the promise of a new life. With control of the moon base, the rebels now had a foothold in enemy territory, a chance to build a resistance and rally more captives. Communications equipment hummed as Jarek and Kale sent encrypted messages to other systems, calling for allies and sharing intelligence. The slavers would not take their defeat lightly. Retaliation was inevitable. But Jarek felt ready. He had fought through cages of steel and hatred, faced monsters and assassins, and never lost sight of why he fought. For love. For freedom. As the group prepared to depart, Jarek held Lyra's hand tightly. "We'll bring an end to this," he promised. "No one else will suffer as we did." Lyra smiled, her grip firm. Together. The engines of their ships roared to life, a symbol of hope and defiance. They lifted off from the moon, leaving behind a fortress reclaimed from darkness and cruelty. Above them, the stars stretched endlessly, a vast, unknown frontier waiting to be explored, liberated, and rebuilt. Jarek looked forward with unwavering determination. The galaxy was vast and dangerous, but so was the human spirit. And that spirit would never be caged again.